Welcome back, this is Cerealsnax, and today I'm going to be talking about my multiplayer first impressions for Borderlands 2. And I put some links down in the description of actually a Let's Play that I did with a number of other YouTubers, and I linked to all their channels. You can actually see me playing in their Let's Plays for Borderlands 2. I haven't posted it on my channel. I didn't feel like it was necessarily kind of what my channel's about, because I mainly do solo stuff. If you have a lot of interest in me posting my footage, I will, but actually it's hard for me to find a lot of time to do long Let's Plays with other people, so I'm actually playing a lot of solo stuff, so that may bias my multiplayer review a little bit with Borderlands 2, but I think I have some good points, and I think that multiplayer with Borderlands 2 is fun. It's a lot of fun, but not for the reasons that you might think. Now, I guess I want to preface this by saying that I've played probably 4 or 5 hours in multiplayer, maybe more than that, probably closer to 8 hours in multiplayer in Borderlands 2, and I really enjoy it. And the reason I enjoy it is because of the people I play with, I think, more than anything else. It's a game that is marketed, really, as a multiplayer game. In fact, I think one of their marketing slogans is, more fun when you play with other people. And, you know, a lot of people have said, oh, you've got to get this game, this is great for multiplayer. I do have some issues with the multiplayer, though, and I think one of the big issues is that in many ways, playing multiplayer is more frustrating than playing by yourself. And in some games, I think that the way the game makers have done it, I mean, this is no different really than Borderlands 1 in that respect, but I wish that they had done some improvements on that, because I found that there was not a lot of synergy between the player characters. For example, you can see here my character's actually doing like this stealthy thing, right? Well, there's no other character in the game that really benefits from that skill. So, for example, I'm trying to think of a good example of a game that would do something like that. I know that games like Guild Wars 2, which is an MMO, there are actually skills that combine when you're with characters of other classes. So you have combo finishers and that sort of thing. Even games as simple as Magicka, when you actually cast spells in conjunction with each other, actually become more powerful. But there is no skill that a character has in Borderlands 2 that actually synergizes with other players. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's incorrect. You know, the Siren has phase shift, which stuns the enemy characters and allows Zero, for example, to snipe them. Well, that's true, but Siren could also snipe those phase-shifted characters herself. So having Zero does really add no benefit. I mean, Siren can do that exact same skill. So it's not what I mean by synergy is really that if they had a skill that other characters could do that would complement the Siren skill, for example. So say the Siren character phase shifts an enemy character. Well, it'd be really cool if they had other characters, for example, the Gunzerker, who benefited from that phase shift. So, say that when an enemy character is phase shifted, the Gunzerker gets, you know, plus 2% damage on any creature that's phase shifted. Then you have a reason to actually play a Gunzerker with a Siren or any other class. I just think that they kind of made every character in this game kind of solo, and multiplayer feels very much like solo play. You're in it for yourself, and another one of the gripes that I have, I think, is the loot system. Now, a lot of people will look at Diablo 3 and say that it was a failure of a game because it just wasn't a lot of fun. It was kind of a lot of repetition, and I know there's a lot of criticism of that game, but the loot system was genius, and it was basically that when you kill a creature, the loot that drops is your loot and your loot alone. And that does make it a solo game in multiplayer, sort of, but it also makes it not every man for himself, because in this game, when loot drops, if you're not with friends, it is a free-for-all to get that loot. And some people say, oh, well, then just only play with friends, but you know, not everybody has the same schedule, not everybody has 1,000 friends that are playing Borderlands 2, and I think that most players will find that if they could just quick match into a game and not have to worry about losing all their loot that they fight for, it would make the game a little bit more popular. So these are my own criticisms, these are my own thoughts on the game in terms of multiplayer. I feel like Diablo got it right in multiplayer, even if it didn't really get the same things right that Borderlands 2 gets in terms of creativity and exciting story and that sort of thing. Like, I don't want to take anything away from Borderlands 2. I think it's a great game. I think it's far, far superior to Diablo. I love playing with friends in Borderlands 2. I think playing with friends in Borderlands 2 is much more fun than playing with friends in Diablo. However, I think the only real reason that Borderlands 2 is fun to play with friends is because everything is more fun to do with friends. Going on a bike ride is more fun to do with your friends, and there's no benefit to going on a bike ride with friends except for their companionship. So I guess my point is that from a biking perspective, you can't bike any faster when you're with your friends. You can't cover any more distance when you're with your friends. You can't do anything extra on your bike that you wouldn't be able to do solo. But everybody likes to go biking with their friends because you have somebody to talk to, you have somebody, but it's not biking that adds that benefit, it's just being with your friends. And I think that's the same thing with Borderlands 2. And I can compare it to games like Diablo 3 because I think Diablo 3 reminds me of, for example, a different type of activity, like maybe kayaking in a double-person kayak or a double-person canoe. You can go further in a double-person canoe because you got two people rowing, and that's kind of, there's some synergy there. And I wish that Borderlands 2 had kind of captured that concept in their multiplayer. Like I said, I still think it's a lot of fun if you have friends that you can play with. I think this game is worth it, but I will say that playing solo is just as exciting, and I think people downplay the solo aspect of this game because of the multiplayer aspect. And I think most of this game I will probably end up playing solo, and not because I don't have great friends to play with, but because it's harder and harder nowadays to coordinate our schedules, and I end up playing solo and enjoying it just as much. I think that a lot of marketing out there has basically made it sound like playing a solo game of Borderlands 2 is not worth it. You need to play with your friends, and I think that's entirely incorrect, and I think that's the point of my thing. So I'm not saying that multiplayer is horrible, because it's not. It's great. I just am disappointed that they couldn't make it accessible in such a way that, you know, you could just join up with any crazy random people on the internet, because everybody on the internet is crazy and random, and and you all know this. You all know that if you do a quick match in any game, you're going to be joined by a bunch of people who are most likely idiots in your mind. And that may or may not be the case. You may get lucky. Sometimes you may get matched up with people who are decent. But the anonymity of the internet will make it so that most people are looking out for themselves. And that's just the unfortunate truth about the internet. And I think that game makers need to be aware of that. And they need to start thinking about how they can modify their game engine so that it will make it much easier to play and not feel like you're basically getting, you know, beat more by your companions in the game than you are by the actual enemies in the game, if you take my meaning. So that said, there's some other interesting things about multiplayer that I like to cover. Some of the things are much more interesting. Of course, when you're driving vehicles, you can have characters in the gunning station, so you can have one character who's driving and one person shooting the guns. Of course, again, that's not really like it adds any more benefit, but it's kind of fun because you got one person who's taking care of the driving and one person who's really focusing on shooting. Not a huge benefit, but it's fun, right? Because you're with your friends. The other thing that is interesting, and actually probably from a more beneficial point of view, and not even from a gameplay point of view, is the gambling in Borderlands 2. There's a gambling machine, and they're fun to play around with. And you will find that when you are with your friends, if you happen to win items like Iridium, which is an item that you can use to purchase items in the game, it's a currency, that when you're with your friends, if you win Iridium in those gambling machines, everybody gets an equal share of that Iridium. And a friend of mine that I play with he's another YouTuber, Bunsy the Frog, his channel is actually linked down here. It's actually the one that pointed this out. So if you have all 4 of your friends online, that's the best time to be doing the gambling machines, so that you win that Iridium and everybody gets the same amount of Iridium and can use it to spend. So other than that, actually I found that the gambling is not very worthwhile, especially if you're in a solo game. So that said, I still recommend Borderlands 2 as a must-buy. You know, I paid full price for it. Well, I didn't pay full price, but I got in the 4-pack. So if you've got 3 other friends that want to buy it, I'd say buy it in the 4-pack on Steam. You get a $15 discount basically for each copy of the game, and play together. Enjoy the multiplayer together. But I will say that you will find quickly that playing multiplayer together is maybe not necessarily the experience you were expecting. You know, one of the things, this is something that I haven't mentioned earlier, is that the enemies, the health is actually scaled up significantly. So one thing I'd hoped that they had done, and this is kind of just another aside, I guess, another aside criticism of the multiplayer, is that I feel like Gearbox took a little bit of a shortcut on this, and they did this on Borderlands 1 too, so it's not like I expected any different. But in the multiplayer, instead of, for example, in Diablo 3, you'll find that when you're playing multiplayer, it seems like there's more enemies. Well, instead of doing something more innovative like adding more enemies or adding enemies that have different skills or that sort of thing, all Gearbox did is up the hit points of the enemies. So they just made everybody tougher to kill, which to me seems like a little bit of a shortcut. It's a little bit of a cop-out. I wish that they had learned from the first game and had actually made it a little more innovative when you have multiple people playing, so that instead of having maybe one badass marauder, you have 10 badass marauders when you're playing a four-player game. You know, make it and that's not even that innovative. Maybe make it so that instead of having the 2 badass marauders, you've got 10 badass marauders, and each one of them has a different type of elemental gun. Something to mix it up as opposed to just increasing their hit points, which just seems cheap to me. And it also feels very strange when you're fighting an enemy and instead of the single player game where you feel like you shoot them 3 or 4 times and they die, the boss, which still takes some work. In the multiplayer game, you feel like you have to unload hundreds of bullets into that boss to kill them, which completely takes you out of the immersiveness of the game, in my opinion, because no person can take hundreds of bullets and survive. And that may work for medieval type games where you're beating them with a sword or whatever, but it doesn't seem to really work with a bullet type game, and kind of distracts me from the whole point in this story. So I feel like I've spent this entire review criticizing Borderlands 2 multiplayer, but I don't think that I have. It's a great multiplayer game. I just am slightly disappointed, slightly. And that said, at the end of the day, I say you should buy it. So hope you've enjoyed my quick Borderlands 2 multiplayer first impressions. Maybe it was more of a rant, but if you liked, please like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for joining me.